With the chaos and fast life of the city, Elizabeth, a 30-year-old writer and a businesswoman, decided to take a break and spend a few days in a small town. She had heard about it from her grandma, how peaceful it was and how it had changed little over the years. The town's library was the first place she visited. It was a large, comforting building that stood out in the quiet town. She stepped inside and felt the coolness of the air and the sweet scent of old books and leather. The silence was like a balm to her soul after the endless cacophony of the city. She looked around, taking in the sight of the towering shelves and the warm glow of the pendant lights that hung from the high ceilings. Elizabeth had always loved the feel of a good book in her hands and the smell of the ink on the pages. She had spent her childhood in libraries, escaping into the worlds within the books. As she was looking through the books, a calm voice with a hint of playfulness called from behind her. "Excuse me, can I help you find something?" Elizabeth turned around to face the source of the voice. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, was approaching her with a friendly smile. The girl's eyes sparkled with curiosity and a touch of mischief, as if she had a secret she was dying to share. Elizabeth took in her appearance: the casual sweater over a simple blouse, the glasses perched on her nose, and the hair tied back in a loose ponytail. The name tag on her shirt read Library Assistant, Haley. For a moment, Elizabeth felt a strange sensation, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It was a mix of intrigue and wariness. The girl's cheerfulness was almost palpable, like a warm cup of tea on a cold day. But she knew she wasn't one for small talk and the easy camaraderie that came with it. She was a solitary creature, content with the company of her characters and the quiet whispers of her thoughts. Yet, there was something about Haley that made her want to stay, to explore the curiosity that had sparked within her. Just looking around, Elizabeth replied with a forced smile, hoping to keep the conversation brief. She didn't want to explain herself to a stranger, especially one so vibrant and full of life. Haley, however, didn't seem to get the hint. She walked closer, her eyes scanning Elizabeth from head to toe. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked with a tilt of her head. Her tone was light, but Elizabeth could feel the weight of the question. She was used to being an enigma, someone who didn't fit neatly into the boxes of small-town curiosity. She had built walls around herself over the years, and she wasn't about to let them crumble now. "Just passing through," she said, her voice cool and measured. She didn't want to give too much away. Haley nodded, seemingly unfazed by Elizabeth's aloofness. Instead, she leaned against the shelf, her arms crossed over her chest. "Well, if you ever need a recommendation, I'm here every evening," she offered with a wink. "I know this place like the back of my hand." Elizabeth felt an unexpected pull towards Haley's warmth, but she remained guarded. "Thanks, I'll keep that in mind," she said, her voice a careful blend of politeness and distance. Despite her reservations, she found herself returning to the library each night, drawn in by the comforting silence and the allure of the young librarian. Haley was always there, eager to chat and suggest books that she thought Elizabeth might enjoy. The conversation started off small, but gradually grew longer, more personal. "So, what do you do when you are not working here?" "I only see you in the evenings," Elizabeth asked one time as she was turning pages of the book. "I'm a student at the local university, studying literature," Haley said with a proud smile. "And I'm working on a novel of my own, actually," she added shyly. Elizabeth's eyes widened, the curiosity getting the better of her. "A novelist in the making," she said, raising an eyebrow. "What's it about?" "It's a love story," Haley said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "But it's not your typical romance. It's more about the journey of self-discovery and how love can change a person." Elizabeth couldn't help but feel a pang of interest. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had come here to escape her own love-tainted past and the tumultuous world of her characters. only to find herself drawn to a girl whose heart was brimming with the very emotion she had tried to lock away. She nodded, keeping her expression neutral. That sounds enlightening. Over the next few days, their interactions grew more frequent and less forced. Haley would save her a spot by the large bay window, the perfect spot to read with the soft glow of the setting sun, and they'd share snippets of their days, the books they had read, and their thoughts on various authors. It was a dance of words, a gentle flirtation of wit and intellect. Elizabeth found herself looking forward to these encounters, finding comfort in the predictability of their meetings and the unpredictability of their conversations. One evening, as Elizabeth sat in her usual spot, a book open but untouched on her lap, she watched Haley help an elderly man find a book about gardening. The way her eyes lit up with excitement and her voice softened with kindness made Elizabeth's chest tighten. She had never seen someone so invested in the happiness of others, so openly caring. It was a stark contrast to her own guarded nature, a flaw she had always believed was a necessity in the cutthroat world she had left behind. When the old man left, Haley turned to her with a smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. "You seem absent-minded, Liz. What's up?" she asked, approaching the chair. Elizabeth felt the need to share something real, something she hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. She took a deep breath, letting the words flow from her in a whisper. "I've been thinking about your novel," she said, her eyes on the floor. "Really?" Haley leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "What about it?" Elizabeth paused, gathering her thoughts. "I was just wondering how someone so young could write about love and self-discovery with such depth. It seems like a complex topic, one that takes years of experience to truly understand." She looked up, meeting Haley's gaze. Haley's eyes searched hers, as if looking for a hidden meaning behind the words. "You'd be surprised," Haley said, her smile gentle. "Love isn't just about age or experience. It's about openness, about letting yourself feel and learn from every encounter, no matter how small." Elizabeth felt a twinge of something she hadn't felt in a long time, the desire to be understood. To be seen beyond the cold, composed exterior she had constructed. She looked into Haley's eyes and saw the earnestness, the depth of emotion that she had been avoiding in her own life. It was both terrifying and alluring. "Maybe you're right," she conceded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe there's more to love than I've allowed myself to believe." Haley's smile grew wider, and she took a seat next to Elizabeth. "You know, I've noticed you come here every evening," she said, her tone casual yet observant. "Is there something in particular you're searching for?" Elizabeth's eyes searched the rows of books, avoiding Haley's gaze. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I think I just needed a change of scenery, a break from everything." "Well, I'm glad you found us," Haley said with a warmth that sent a shiver down Elizabeth's spine. "You know, sometimes the most unexpected places hold the answers we're looking for." "What do you do on Saturday?" Elizabeth asked, changing the subject, her voice a little shakier than she intended. "Usually I'm here, but if it's not too busy, Chloe and I might take a break and go to the park," Haley replied, her eyes sparkling with a hint of an invitation. "Chloe?" Elizabeth inquired, trying to keep the conversation casual despite the sudden racing of her heart. "Yes, she's my best friend and also a student. She works here too. She's like the sunshine in this place," Haley said, her eyes looking into the distance with affection. Elizabeth felt a twinge of something she thought she wouldn't feel again, jealousy. "Sounds like you two are inseparable." "We are," Haley said with a nod, "but we're always happy to make room for more friends." She paused, looking at Elizabeth as if gauging her interest. "Would you like to join us?" Elizabeth hesitated, her walls threatening to crumble at the prospect of letting someone into her solitary world. But the warmth in Haley's voice was too tempting to resist. "Maybe," she said, her voice unsure. I'll think about it. As the days go by, Elizabeth found herself not only visiting the library every evening but also eagerly anticipating her conversations with Haley. They'd often sit together by the window, Elizabeth sharing her experiences from the city and her struggles with writing, and Haley would listen with a mix of fascination and empathy, sharing her own stories of school and the small town she called home. It was during these moments that Elizabeth felt a crack in her emotional armor, a softening of the coldness that had encased her heart for so long. One evening, as the library was about to close, Haley approached Elizabeth with a book in hand. I think you might like this, she said, placing it on the table between them. It was a collection of poetry by a local author. Her work is about finding beauty in the mundane, breaking down barriers, and letting love in. Elizabeth took the book, feeling the weight of the unspoken words behind Haley's suggestion. She looked up at the young student, whose eyes were filled with a knowing that made her heart race. Thank you, she murmured, her voice barely audible. You're welcome, Haley replied with a knowing smile. See you tomorrow? Elizabeth nodded, unable to find the words to express how much those simple interactions meant to her. As she left the library that night, the book tucked under her arm, she felt the beginnings of a shift within herself. The quiet town, the soothing embrace of the library, and most importantly, Haley's unassuming presence had started to melt the ice around her heart. The following days saw Elizabeth's visits to the library become longer, her conversations with Haley more profound. She found herself opening up about her fears of failure, her love for the characters she had created, and the pain of leaving them behind. Haley listened intently, her eyes filled with understanding, offering insights that made Elizabeth question the walls she had built. Let me take you out to lunch when you are free, Elizabeth found herself saying one evening, surprising even herself with the invitation. I'd love that, Haley replied, her smile lighting up the room. They decided to meet at a quaint cafe the next day. Elizabeth arrived early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She had never allowed herself to be this vulnerable with someone, especially not a girl she had met in such a whimsical setting. But as Haley walked in, her cheeks flushed with excitement and her eyes sparkling with anticipation, Elizabeth felt the anxiety dissipate. They spent the afternoon discussing poetry and the art of storytelling, their conversation flowing as naturally as a river in spring. Are you currently seeing someone? Elizabeth asked, not sure if she was ready to hear the answer. No, Haley said, her smile unwavering. I've been too busy with school and work. Plus, it's hard to find someone who gets me, you know? She took a sip of her tea, her gaze never leaving Elizabeth's. What about you? Elizabeth's heart skipped a beat. No, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I haven't been in a relationship for a long time. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken understanding. Haley reached out and placed her hand over Elizabeth's, the warmth of her touch sending a jolt through Elizabeth's body. Sometimes, she began, the best love stories start in the most unexpected places. Elizabeth felt a blush creep up her neck. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that, she said, her voice a mix of hope and fear. That's okay, Haley said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. I'm not asking you to be ready, just to consider the possibility. Elizabeth nodded, her eyes lingering on their entwined hands. The simple touch was more intimate than any words could convey. She had spent her life constructing barriers, but here she was, in a small-town library with a young student, feeling the walls she had so meticulously built start to crack. Their lunches turned into dinners, and soon, Elizabeth found herself looking forward to every moment she could spend with Haley. They'd walk through the town's quiet streets, their conversations ranging from their favorite books to their deepest fears. Haley had a way of making her feel seen, of making her feel as if the ice that had surrounded her heart was slowly thawing. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, and she found it both exhilarating and terrifying. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with hues of pink and orange, Haley took Elizabeth to a hidden spot in the local park. It was a small clearing with a bench, surrounded by tall trees that whispered secrets in the breeze. They sat side by side, their shoulders brushing against each other, the silence between them as comfortable as an old sweater. "I know you're leaving soon," Haley began, her voice tinged with a sadness that Elizabeth hadn't noticed before. "But I had to tell you something before you go." Elizabeth's heart pounded in her chest as she turned to face Haley, the setting sun casting a warm glow on her features. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I know this might be crazy, but I love you, more than a friend should," Haley said, her eyes searching Elizabeth's face for a reaction. The confession hung in the air, as delicate as a feather in a gentle breeze. Elizabeth felt as though the earth had stopped spinning. Haley's words echoed in her mind, resonating with the feelings she had been trying to suppress. She had been so focused on her work, on her solitude, that she hadn't allowed herself to recognize the warmth that had been growing within her. But here it was, laid bare before her, and she couldn't deny it any longer. Taking a deep breath, Elizabeth turned to Haley, her eyes searching the younger woman's face for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. But all she found was a gentle determination, a look that said she had been waiting for this moment for a while. "I have always loved you, Haley. Since the moment I saw you," she finally managed to say, her voice shaking with emotion. The words seemed to hang in the air, as if the trees themselves were listening to their confession. Haley's eyes grew wide with surprise, and then she leaned in, her hand finding Elizabeth's cheek. "Really?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Elizabeth nodded, her heart racing. "Really?" she murmured. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Haley's lips met hers. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, but it grew in intensity, the passion between them burning as bright as the setting sun. It was a kiss filled with all the unspoken words, the shared moments, and the understanding that had grown between them over the past weeks.